If you want to learn more about the value of curiosity, especially its power in building your capacity for creativity, go to figure8thinking.com and download all sorts of great freebies. Have you ever noticed that children are so great at asking questions, sometimes annoyingly so, but their insatiable thirst to ask why, how come, there's a reason for that. It turns out that asking questions, as Warren Berger likes to say, is a way of thinking. Asking questions is how we make sense of the world around us. It's how we learn the rules. It's also how we learn where and how we might break the rules. And it's essential for us to form our identity. So we're so great at asking questions when we're young, but how come we don't find more cultures of inquiry, more curious teams, more work environments where curiosity gets normalized? Well, one of the reasons has to do with our educational system. Unfortunately, a lot of us have been educated in a way to lean into certainty, right? We end up being rewarded for being more certain than more curious. We end up being rewarded for being more interesting than interested. And I'm here to tell you that we need to flip that. Now more than ever, in a time where AI is something that's scaring some of us and we're thinking that's going to take over our jobs, it turns out that your capacity for creativity, which is grounded in your ability to ask new and different sorts of questions, is more essential than ever. And even consider the new job that has emerged over the past 5 years of a prompt engineer, right? These are the folks who are skilled at asking different sorts of questions, reframing questions, and then helping the computer scientists to design the algorithm around these sorts of questions, right? So we are living literally in a society, in a work culture that's driven by asking all sorts of questions. So I've given a lot of thought about the value of curiosity, about how important it is to ask questions and why we don't ask more questions. So I want to dive a little bit more right now into exploring why we don't ask more questions. And I first want to start with helping you to embrace three of the most beautiful words in the English language. And those three words are, I don't know. That's right. I don't know are three of the most beautiful words in the English language because saying out loud, I don't know the answer, I don't know the way forward, takes you to the precipice of discovery. Not only that, I don't know about you, but when I think back to my best teachers, my best coaches, the leaders who I admired the most, they were the folks who, when confronted with a bombardment of questions or a sea of confusion, were not afraid to simply say, you know what? I don't know, but let's figure that out. Or I don't know, but the next time I see you, I will make sure I have a couple of ideas and ways forward that we can explore together. There was something just so refreshing about that quality in a teacher, and a coach, a manager, or a leader, and particularly because their ability to say, I don't know, really was implicitly giving me the permission to admit when I didn't know, to make me understand that that's actually not coming from a place of deficiency. That's actually coming from a place of huge capacity to explore what might be, what's possible. So let's really embrace being able to say, I don't know, and flip on its head our perception that it's something negative. So, why aren't we saying, I don't know more? Why are we reticent about raising our hand and asking more questions? Well, first, let's kind of break down what curiosity actually is, right? I used to think that curiosity was the absence of knowing, right? That the reason I might be curious about something is because I had no idea about fill in the blank. Well, I read a really great book years ago by Ian Leslie called Curious. And in this book, Ian defines curiosity as the product of an information gap. In other words, you need to know just a little bit about something to be more curious about it. So think about this. A toddler wanders into a kitchen and maybe there's a gas range with one of the burners turned on, and the toddler recognizes that beautiful cobalt blue color. They've seen that color before. They like that color blue. And then they think, oh, that's interesting, this motion that the flame is making. They've seen something like that before that reminds them of something, and maybe of a leaf blowing outside. So they may begin to extend their hand forward to explore more, and hopefully there's an adult in the kitchen and they pull their arm away. But the point is that toddler knew just a little bit about that flame. So curiosity is the product of an information gap. Warren Berger, who is the author of a lot of great books on curiosity, he talks about how asking questions is a way of thinking, right? We actually should encourage and teach question asking because it sparks different synapses, neurosynapses in the brain. And Jeff Wetzler has written a great book called Ask, which explores all of the ways that curiosity and framing and reframing questions helps us to collaborate, build better businesses, and build better leadership. I like to say that questions are inputs into a system, right? And the more diverse the questions that you have, the more interesting and innovative the output. So that's just to kind of level set our understanding of what curiosity is. Let's just go with Ian Leslie's definition that curiosity is the product of an information gap. So why don't we say, I don't know more often? Why don't we lean into curiosity inquiry? Well, I think there are three basic reasons why we don't have greater cultures of inquiry, where we're not admitting when we don't know more often and more regularly, and we're not embracing questions and curiosity. The number one reason is fear, right? We actually, a lot of us, myself included, have experienced some sort of question shaming, right? Most of us can recall a moment in time, either in our educational process or early on the job, where we dared to raise our hand to ask a question, and maybe we got giggles, or even worse, maybe we were ignored. And so you learn, I don't do that around here. I'm not going to raise my hand. I'm not going to ask questions. So one reason why we don't see more cultures of inquiry comes from fear and having been, as I like to say, question shamed. The second reason why we don't ask more questions and we don't have greater cultures of inquiry is because it's not modeled for us, right? I started out by talking about how we on the side of being more certain than being more curious. And I love that phrase. I learned that phrase from a nonprofit leader. I used to serve on the board of her nonprofit. That's Carla Silver. The tagline of her organization, Leadership and Design, is to be more curious than certain. That's just like the value that Carla leads from. So we don't have the modeling enough in our classrooms, in our offices, in our cubicles, on the floors that we're working on, and among our leaders, of how to ask questions. And I'll tell you, if you are a manager, if you are a leader, what not to do if you're trying to build a culture of inquiry is to say, hey guys, I welcome all your questions. You'll probably get deer in the headlights, or defensive stances, or angry stares, because people have been question shamed. They haven't been practicing it. So the way to model being more curious so that you can encourage question asking is to practice self inquiry, is to refer back to a choice or a decision that was made, and to say, that decision we made 2 years ago to not work with company X, I'm beginning to rethink that. I wonder if maybe that wasn't the best way forward. And I've been thinking, what if we reapproached them and we considered a co-opetition model? And what you've just done is you have implicitly said, I don't know. You've admitted that you have this curiosity that you want to explore, and you are inviting others to explore that pathway, that question with you. So number one reason why we're not asking more questions is fear. We've been question shamed. Number two reason is it hasn't been modeled enough for us. And the number three reason is we actually don't really understand questions. And what I mean by that is there's actually a taxonomy of questions. There are what we can call divergent questions and convergent questions. Now, convergent questions you actually are really familiar with. Convergent questions are questions like who, what, when, where. Very perfunctory, get to the point, and we feel pretty proud of ourselves when we can answer who, what, when, where. It gets right to the point. It's solutions based. The divergent questions are questions like why, or what if, or I wonder. And I don't know about you, but when I ask myself, what if, there's a physical shift in my body. I literally feel lighter. I feel more expansive. And so my suggestion is that we just begin to be more observant throughout the day on our teams, in our organization, when we're working through something ourselves. Is there a balance between asking the convergent, perfunctory, who, what, when, where questions, along with the very divergent questions of why, what if, how might we? Now, how is interesting, right? Because how is actually a hybrid. How can be a convergent question like, how are we going to get this done? How can also be, how might we, right? So those are the three reasons why through my experience and work with clients over the years, while we're not asking more questions, it's because we have, it hasn't been modeled for us. A lot of us have been question shamed, and we don't actually understand it, that there's this taxonomy of questions. Now, having said all that, the research is reflective of this entire conversation. The research data show that 62% of managers believe that curiosity leads to greater productivity and efficiency. 72% of managers look at curiosity as a very valuable trait. However, 75% of people, us schmucks who go to work every day, we don't experience work environments that actually give us an opportunity to raise our hand, to be more curious than certain. So there's this gap between managers saying, yes, we see a link between curiosity and efficiency and productivity, and then not designing space and time for people to feel comfortable asking questions, exploring questions, and falling in love with process. So I encourage you, don't shrink away from raising your hand, from asking not only the convergent question, but the thought-provoking divergent question. You will expand, your team will flourish, and your productivity will soar.